Ever since the Game Boy was first released in 1491, handheld games have always been overlooked as inferior, which is actually understandable since, more often than not, handheld games have either always been watered-down ports of their console counterparts, or just complete remakes whenever the handheld wasn't powerful enough to replicate the original game. But even though most people never really minded that handheld games were inferior since they were portable and cheaper, I still don't think the Game Boy line fully gets the respect it deserves. Because over the years, there've been an assload of original handheld games made from the ground up that could stand toe-to-toe with anything else people were playing at the time. But sadly, due to the stigma that handhelds are inferior, the average Carls and Rickies never really held these games in the same regard. Thankfully, though, Nintendo's been breathing new life into a few of the best Game Boy games lately. But even though this makes me happy enough to leak ectoplasm in my underpants, I'm a human being on the internet in 2019, so of course I'm always gonna want more. Cause although Link's Awakening's possibly the best Game Boy game ever, there's still plenty of other titles that might not ever get a remake if I don't take it upon myself to create a fuss over it. Cause according to my inside source at Nintendo, who only wish to be identified as D. Bowser or Douglas B., the higher-ups at the company watch my videos all day for ideas. But before we get into which Game Boy games still need HD remakes, let me just say that this isn't a video about the best Game Boy games ever, so if a game doesn't really have a whole lot to offer with a remake other than improved graphics, then no matter how good it is, I'm not going to talk about it here, because I'm sure Game Boy games are going to come to Nintendo's online service eventually, so it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense if Nintendo wasted all their development time remaking every good Game Boy game that was ever made. And since that disqualifies most of the best games on the original Game Boy, I'm also going to include any portable Nintendo platform that had Boy in the title as well. So sit back, wash your hands, pour yourself a tasty beverage, wash your hands, press the subscribe button if you haven't already, wash your hands again for good measure, and allow me, the world's cutest full-grown boy Cameron, to tell you 9 Game Boy games that need HD remakes the most. Number 9. Pokemon Gold and Silver. This one's pretty obvious given how successful the Pokemon Yellow remake was, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't happen. And I know a lot of people have mixed feelings on Pokemon Let's Go, but as long as the main Pokemon series isn't going anywhere, then I'm all for getting a new Let's Go game every few years, especially if that means we could play through Gold and Silver for a third time. Although, it'd be nice if they didn't force motion controls in docked mode and let us battle wild Pokemon. Number 8. Hey, look over there! Virtual Boy Wario Land. Alright, I know there's better platformers on the Game Boy, especially the ones with Wario in it, but there's always going to be ways to play those games. And like I said in the beginning of the video, I'm not going to include games that can't really be improved with a remake. And since the Virtual Boy's been known to give you neck pains, a headache, and rectal bleeding, I'd say that all of its games have room for improvement. And besides, the Virtual Boy does have Boy in the title, and it was technically a portable, so I'm not exactly breaking any rules. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this game needs a full retail remake or anything like that since it's relatively short, but Nintendo could stand to make a few bite-sized eShop games for like $10 to $20 like they used to on the 3DS. But speaking of the 3DS, that really is what this game should have been remade for in the first place. But just because that opportunity's long gone doesn't mean that Virtual Boy's Wario Land doesn't deserve to be played, because even in 2019, the game's a really solid platformer. But aside from improving the game by just not having it be on Virtual Boy, a graphical overhaul to make it look more like Wario Land Shake It wouldn't hurt either. And for everybody who's ready to throw me in a pile of horse yogurt for sneaking a Virtual Boy game in the video though, just know that I didn't break any laws. And if I didn't speak up for this game now, then I'd probably never get another chance to. Because while this game does need a remake of some sort, I definitely wouldn't dedicate an entire video towards it. So with that being said, are we cool?
What the fuck did I do wrong?
Number 7. Metroid Fusion. Even though Nintendo's always listened to my suggestions in the past, this one's gonna be a tough sell, which might confuse you cause surely a 2D Metroid game would sell out the ass, right? Well, if you've watched my video about the 9 best 3DS games that nobody played, you'd know that nobody bought the Metroid 2 remake besides me and like 5 other people, and they did count the display copy at the store for those sales numbers. It's a damn shame this game didn't sell very well though, cause it just tells Nintendo that listening to the fans doesn't always pay off. A lot of people got mad a few years ago when Reggie said that fan petitions don't really affect what Nintendo does, but when Metroid fans didn't buy a new Metroid game after begging for one for so long, it kind of proved Reggie's point that just because fans say they want something doesn't mean they're gonna buy it. If Nintendo were to take another chance at remaking a 2D Metroid game though, then I think Fusion would be the best bet. The graphics are still pretty good since it's a Game Boy Advance game, which is why it's relatively low on this list, but I still think an HD remake would really make this game even better. And if N-Dog really wanted to go the extra mile, then they could add a little more to the adventure like they did with Zero Mission. Number 6. Legend of Zelda: Oracle of Ages and Seasons. Like Pokemon Gold and Silver, it's not too out of the question that these games are next in line for a remake as far as 2D Zelda's concerned. Personally, I'd rather see a brand new 2D Zelda game since Link's Awakening was just revealed, but for the exact same reason why Resident Evil fans want an RE3 remake, Oracle of Ages and Seasons just makes sense. You've already got the graphical style and mechanics worked out for Link's Awakening, and since all three of the original Game Boy games had the same foundations, there'd be a considerably less amount of work to do. So if Nintendo could easily do something that'd make millions of people happy, then they'd be leaving money on the table not to do it. But speaking of Zelda, number 5. Legend of Zelda: The Minish Cap. As if handheld games weren't overlooked enough as it is, Minish Cap's probably the most overlooked portable Zelda. I know fans like it more than Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks, which I also like by the way, but at least people still talk about those games even if they are just complaining about the touch controls. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I want there to be all these Zelda remakes so close to each other instead of a new game, but out of all the Capcom-made Zelda games, Minish Cap's my personal favorite. And even though this isn't as old as the other 3 games, I'd still prefer this get a remake over any of them. You might say this game holds up just fine and doesn't exactly need a remake, which I wouldn't disagree with. But I'd say the same thing about Link's Awakening and Oracle of Ages and Seasons. I can't think of many things about any of these games that didn't age well, but there's still a whole lot that could be added to them, and I'm really hoping they add stuff to Link's Awakening, otherwise just make a new game. Number 4. Resident Evil Gaiden. I know this is probably more controversial than Wario Land on the Virtual Boy, and I'm almost certain this is never going to happen since this game wasn't really that good even when it came out. But to be honest, I kinda miss non-canon games that were set in alternate timelines. And I know this is another reason why handhelds were overlooked, but I like when developers get nuts with side projects and spin-offs. And while I think Hyrule Warriors and Fire Emblem Warriors are fine games, I'm not exactly crazy about them either, so here I am asking for a Resident Evil Gaiden remake. Which is definitely not where I envisioned I'd be at this point in my life, but what can you do? Even though the original game wasn't really all that great, and the awkward shooting control should die in a grease fire before being remade for an HD game in 2019, I still think everything else about the game has potential for a remake, mainly to do with the fact that it takes place on a cruise ship. And I know Resident Evil Revelations was on a boat as well, but I don't think either of those 2 games fully executed how great Resident Evil could be on a cruise ship. But with the game engine of the Resident Evil 2 remake, I think the third try'd definitely be the charm. Plus, I think it'd be cool to see Leon and Barry interacting outside of a Game Boy Color game, even if it wasn't an alternate timeline. But again, I'd bet my left ass that this game's gonna stay dead and buried, because I'm sure Capcom would go bankrupt within minutes if they announced a Resident Evil Gaiden remake. I'm just saying that I think it'd be pretty cool to see Leon and Barry interacting outside of a Game Boy Color game, especially if it was in an alternate timeline. But if we're talking about non-canon Game Boy Color games though, then how could we not talk about number 3, Metal Gear Solid Ghost Babel, or just Metal Gear Solid in North America. Unlike Resident Evil Garden, apparently, according to my autocorrect, critics didn't pee all over Metal Gear Solid's Game Boy Color game when it first came out. It was actually met with universal praise. Even this scumbag right here, Joey, thought it was pretty good, and he hates everything. Since Metal Gear Solid would have never worked on the Game Boy Color in 3D, series creator Hideo Kojima instead decided to capitalize on the Game Boy's install base by making a non-canon sequel to the original Metal Gear games with the original 2D gameplay mechanics as well, and the end result's Ghost Babel being way better than it had any right to be. Sadly though, much like everybody else, even Konami forgot this game exists since it's never appeared on the 3DS's Virtual Console. But even though a brand new Metal Gear Solid game would be ideal, there's absolutely no way in hell Konami could pull it off without Hideo Kojima. So instead of shitting the bed with another Metal Gear Survive, I think they should just stick to remakes. And since we're talking about the Game Boy, Metal Gear Solid Ghost Babel is definitely something I'd like to see. Number 2. Mother 3. Nobody's exactly 100% sure what the holdup is for Mother 3 coming to the West. Maybe Nintendo doesn't feel like translating it, maybe 4 or 5 overly sensitive people would find something they don't like about it, or maybe they just don't think it'd make a lot of money. All I know is that there's almost certainly never going to be a Mother 4 with Shigesato Itoi not wanting to make another game, and much like Metal Gear, it's just not possible without the original creator involved. So if there's never going to be a new game, and Mother 3's chances coming to the West are up in the air, why not just do a remake instead? And I'd be all for a remake of the first 2 games as well, but the reason I'm bringing Mother 3 up besides the fact that it was made for a Game Boy console is because they already started working on it in 3D for the 64, and I'm just straight up curious what Mother 3 would have been like with another dimension. Obviously it was scrapped for a reason, but 3D gaming back then was still pretty complicated for developers, and now that they've more or less figured it out 20 years later, I think it'd be pretty cool to see the game they originally had in mind. But more than likely, the 70-year-old Shigesato Itoi would probably rather just sit around with his pinky in his ass, and I can't exactly say that I blame the guy. Number 1. NES Classic Super Mario Bros.
Yeah, no, we're not doing that.
The real number 1. Golden Sun. As much as I love Nintendo's most popular franchises, I think it'd be nice if they'd focus on some of their lesser-known IPs a little more often, because if the Switch is going to be around for at least 3 or 4 more years, then it won't be too long before all of Nintendo's biggest mascots are on the platform. And I'd rather have variety than 37 Mario, Zelda, and Pokemon games. Relying on popular IPs might be more profitable in the short term, but with Nintendo Directs being the best promotional tool ever, building awareness for new or old franchises has never been easier, and the more Nintendo has left in the chamber, the better it is for them in the long run. So unless there's some cool new IP in the works that we don't know about. I hope there's something in the future for Golden Sun, because the first game in the series is a heck of a mess of fun, and based on what I've heard, I'd imagine the other two are as well. But to be honest, I haven't played those yet. And I know hardcore fans would probably prefer a brand new Golden Sun game, but it's been almost a decade since the last game in the series, so I think a remake would be the best way to introduce new fans to the series, as well as refresh everyone's memory, because all three Golden Sun games are connected, so you'd just be alienating a lot of fans to continue the story. Fortunately though, since Smash Ultimate has 8 different spirits from Golden Sun and even a Mii costume for Isaac, I'm pretty sure Nintendo hasn't forgotten about this franchise. So I'd wager the chances of this series waking up from its medically induced coma in the near future are pretty high. And even though Golden Sun isn't necessarily my favorite game on this list, I do think it's the most deserving of an HD remake. But two people who I'd love to see an HD remake for today's patrons of the day, Epic Noob Gamer and Devin Ray. If you want to join these badasses, then consider supporting this channel on Patreon for loot boxes and silly rewards in the mail, or check the merch store out for t-shirts and mugs. And if you want to make cameos in videos, then just send us pictures of videos of you rocking the merch doing whatever you want. What Game Boy games do you want to see remade in HD though? Do you agree with my picks? Or do you think I crossed the line by sneaking a Virtual Boy game into the list? Either way, let me know what you think in the comments below, and as always, I'll pin whatever I find most entertaining or intriguing. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already to prove to the world how big of a badass you are. And if you like and share this video, it really goes a long way to help this channel grow. My name's Cameron, and I'll see you next time.
So I want to say thank you to your loyalty, thank you for your support.